What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 461. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, what up, buddy?
Not a whole lot. Getting prepped for hometown GP. Get one of those about every year at this rate. There's GP Denver's coming up this weekend, so looking forward to that.
Dude, I'm playing in it.
Same.
Yeah, so this is kind of cool. I don't
has there ever been a GP
that we both played in?
No, I think one of the few you played in I did coverage of.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to be over there playing with my buddy Adam and with Woody, who's been on the show a few times now. And we're gonna make a little run. There's no video coverage for it, so I had the weekend off.
Acquaintance of the show, Woody.
yeah, I like that. Yeah, especially after what he tweeted today, that monster. But yeah, and I'm definitely looking forward to getting out there and battling and not have to work the whole weekend instead. So we'll see how it goes. But I'll be tweeting, and I'm sure you will too, Luis, about how our teams are doing and all that. We're going to be playing Guilds of Ravnica team sealed in that tournament. And of course, this episode of LR is all about Guilds of Ravnica first impressions. We've now really had a good chunk of time to get our hands on this set, observe it, play it. And we've got our initial outlook on the set. We're going to be bringing you that today. First, I want to mention our sponsor, channelfireball.com. That's it. That's the place to go, man. If you want to go for anything you need Magic related on the internet, it's Channel Fireball. That's the place. You can find singles there. You can find sealed product. You can get Guilds of Ravnica boxes right now, have them shipped out to your door, and boom, you're going to be doing some team sealed practice or maybe just some straight up sealed practice or doing some booster drafts with your friends. You can get any and all at Channel Fireball. As while you're there, make sure and check out the awesome free content right on the front page. You just go there. There's videos by Reed Duke, Luis Scott-Vargas, right on the front page that you can watch. You can see you guys play Guilds of Ravnica or different constructed formats and all that kind of stuff. And then also you can read the articles. Ben Stark has a video up, and he usually will write an article at some point about the formats as well. One of the best limited players in the world of all time, and you get to get his perspective on it firsthand right there on Channel Fireball. Please do check them out. And of course, Patreon. Patreon.com/limited resources is how you can support the show directly. If this show means something to you, if you've gotten something out of it and you have a little extra, you can go there and support us on it. It's great. And we really appreciate everybody that does. We try to give back as much as we can. And today we've got a few things. We've got the Patreon question of the week, which I'll get to in a second. But first, the Patreon playmat giveaway. We've got the giveaway that I've been doing every week. This one is going to be the one I just got. I got one from GP Montreal. It's Divine Intervention artwork. It's pretty cool. And this one goes, Luis, this one goes to our old friend, Pete Hines.
Yeah, this isn't rigged.
Yeah, he's one of like 1,500, but he got there. Pete has been a longtime supporter of Limited Resources, and we love him. And yeah, so Pete, I'm going to be sending you out this sweet playmat. Thanks so much for your continued support. We really, really appreciate everything you've done for the show, and you're awesome. Hopefully we'll see Pete out at a GP. He's a busy guy, but occasionally he can carve out some time away from his job and his hockey and all that stuff to come
soccer
and soccer and
whatnot.
Everything. Yeah. So hopefully we'll see that. Thank you, Pete. Patreon question of the week is from Sean, who says, and this one's, I'm actually in this too, but this one's a little more directed towards you, Luis. I'm curious about the life of a professional player. What do the pros pay for, and what, if anything, is given to them through sponsorships? What is the threshold of success before a big sponsor like Channel Fireball would sign someone?
So this is a kind of interesting question in that I can only answer from my perspective, and I've gotten to see what a lot of other people kind of how they end up, but I also these things do very wildly. There's no like industry standard. In general, the pros pay for all their stuff. The sponsors, what they don't pay for a whole lot. What you can expect the sponsors to pay for as well, the gear you're wearing and the sleeves you're using. So like Channel Fireball gear and Channel Fireball sleeves, for example. Yeah, you don't have to pay for those. But other than that, it's mostly cash in terms of you get a set amount whatever you negotiate for being on the team, for playing in these events. You also, another very common thing is performance bonuses, where you get a bonus if you make top 8 or top 16 or in some cases an old sponsorship I used to have, not before I even worked for Channel Fireball. I got a bonus if I got a feature match, because that means my sponsor, shout out to Adventures On. This is my original sponsor. I got that whenever I got featured and got on the coverage. But in general, I think it's more efficient to give people money and have them pay their expenses than the other way around. Because Marshall, you know this firsthand. When your flight is booked for you versus when you're given money to book your flight, what ends up being more efficient from a monetary perspective?
Yeah, if I get money, yeah.
Yes.
It allows you to leverage things like frequent traveler programs and my own wishes, right? Like maybe I want to pay more to have a better seat, or maybe I don't care and I'd rather just try to save that.
Also, when you're kind of playing with house money, when someone else is booking your flight, you're not going to take the cheapest flight or the most efficient flight. Not necessarily the cheapest, but you're not really going to try to look for a deal. Why would you, right? So
exactly.
The person who profits there is mostly the airline. So in terms of what it takes to be sponsored, again, there's no hard and fast rule. It is, to some degree a rich get richer sort of deal, but for those who haven't figured it out, that is how all of life works.
Right.
Basically, once you're famous, you can get sponsored, and it's really hard to go the other way around. I mean, Magic, like a lot of other things, it is a lot about networking, and I think it's actually a really important thing to learn. I remember when I was in college, I thought it was pretty unfair, right? And I'm sure there's points in your life, Marshall, where you did too, where you're like, networking, it's about who you know instead of what you can do. Like, that's just nonsense.
It doesn't feel right. Yeah,
that's unfair. But the older I've gotten, and maybe the more networked I've gotten, the more I understand why it's set up like that. Just everything. It's that by networking, you enter in these relationships where you can provide value to another person, and then they can provide value to you, and you're both better off for it. And not in like a malicious way, not in like a quid pro quo, like I'm only friends with you because of the connections you have. Though people do that obviously as well, but more like, hey, I have a good relationship with someone. I know a decent amount about them. I've had good interactions with them. If a couple years later they end up saying like, hey, I've got a job opening here, can you recommend someone? I can I can trust that they can give me a good recommendation. Or if you're hiring them individually, you can also know that they're not someone who's going to lose their mind if an argument happens, right? There's a lot that you can't get out of just knowing someone casually. And the same is true for sponsorship, where as someone who does have a say in who Channel Fireball sponsors, I'm a lot more inclined to sponsor people who I know. And not in a I only sponsor my friends sort of deal, but in
it's a trust
question.
I
trust you to represent the brand well? Do I think that you're going to do a good job? Do I think that you're going to have good results in the future? So it's not all like you have to have good results first. But, for example, we haven't, I guess, officially announced it, so this will work here. We're sponsoring Jack and Quinn Kiefer, two of the Kiefer brothers.
Oh, cool.
And it's because I think they're great, and because I think that even if they don't have tons of success, they have some, and I predict more in the future. So this is me kind of like making a bet on them.
Yeah.
And because they're, I think, good people, good to hang out with, good to like represent CFB, and I generally like their attitude, and their mom's awesome. So
yeah, she is.
That's the sort of thing that it happens kind of organically. There's no benchmark, and I don't know. This is turning into a sign off, but my advice mostly for all of this kind of stuff is try to figure out what kind of qualities someone would want in the position you're trying to get to, and try to figure out the best way to do those things. So it takes some self-marketing before you will provide a sponsor value. You can't just tell them like, I'm great, and they're just not going to believe you.
Right. And the easiest way to get that is by earning credibility, and the easiest way to earn credibility is by winning. Right. I mean, if you win a bunch of tournaments in a row, it's just, the bare minimum that they see is, well, if you wear my shirt, I'm going to get it on camera a bunch, and you're going to be at the top of the standings, and people are going to ask you to do deck techs and features and all this stuff. So it just gives me more visibility. So that's the hard, easy way to do it. Right. I mean, winning is really difficult to do consistently, but if you do, the sponsors will come knocking.
That's really the only shortcut. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, even though there's not a hierarchy exactly, there is something to be putting in your dues, right? Spending time in the scene, representing yourself well, and talking to people so people kind of know who you are. You're a known quantity, and that really helps.
Yeah, I think that the trust thing is one that people tend to underestimate as well. When it comes to getting jobs for Wizards on coverage or getting sponsored by a big website like CFB or whatever, they have to know that they can trust you, because you have to recognize that if they, put their name behind you and you screw that up, you're actually a net negative. Like you can become a public relations problem for them, not just we decided to part ways. I mean, that's usually what happens when somebody screws up really bad, is that the sponsor says, well, I can't be around this anymore. But sometimes that makes the sponsor look really bad too, not just neutral, but bad. And they have to be careful about that stuff. So that's the other thing is, you might think you're the big shot, but I've had people say, oh, I really want to be on coverage and this stuff. And I think, well, okay. But you look at their Twitter and they're just rancid. They're just mean and making fun of people or putting people down, or just, again, like you summed it up by saying not representing the brand well. I mean, nobody wants to be behind somebody like that. So you got to keep that in mind too. It is not easy to do so, but I think the best shortcut is winning, as we said. Okay, let's crack some packs, Luis. We'll do a few of these because these are a great way to get the conversation rolling and to get a big picture idea of what we want going. Then we're going to go into big pictures on the guilds. I've ranked them and then also did a little, we're going to talk about each one of them and where we're at on them right now. It's still relatively early. This pack comes from Matthew Leclerc, out of the GP Montreal. Thank you, Matthew. Let's get into this and see what we've got. All right. Right out the gates, we've got ourselves Rebel Belt Boar.
This is a fun card. It's not a card I would take early, but it's certainly a card I expect to play more often than not.
Yeah, I should read them. This is the 3 and a red 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, creature gets +2/+. So until end turn, color the culprit. 3 and a white instant, destroy target creature with toughness 4 or greater.
This card is quite bad. It just ends up that the white decks don't really want this, and this misses too often. I've been pretty down on this and the rare version of it, whatever that's called.
The Citywide Bust, or
yeah,
the one that does a whole lot of coloring of the culprits.
Yes.
Next is Passwall Adept, 1 and a blue for a 1/3, and you can pay 2 and a blue to have a creature become unblockable until end of turn.
This is a fine card. There's a lot of Dimir cards, because this is a little more Dimir than it is it, that kind of go into the same category. And yeah, I mean, this card is playable, but it's not a card I'm that excited to have.
Yeah, I've been playing in quite a few of these, not like one per deck. And I do find that it can open up the door for wins late, and it's like a good enough blocker, but it's kind of just never where I really want to be to start with, but it ends up, pulling its weight.
Well, it does two different things, right? It provides you early defense and a late game, mid to late game way to get damage through. It doesn't do either of them spectacularly well, but it does both. And it's a fine card to put in for that.
It's an embarrassing number of times that I've activated this on a Veiled Shade and then pumped the rest of my mana into it.
That's not efficient.
that's where I've ended up there a few times, man. Urban Utopia, 1 and a green, enchant land. You draw a card when this thing ETBs, and the land can add mana of any color.
I actually haven't really found there's a 5-color deck that's particularly good.
No, because you have to be in green.
Well, that's certainly part of it. It's also that there's not a lack of playables. So if you're 3 versus 5 colors, it doesn't really change that much. You're going to have enough playables already. So it's pretty easy to be 3 colors without going to the distance of using Urban Utopias or whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Burglar Rat. This card's done some work. 1 and a black for a 1/1. When it ETBs, your opponent discards a card.
Yeah, this is the card I would take right now.
Yeah, same. Good with Severed Strands as well.
It's good with Severed Strands. It's good in Dimir as a 2-drop that affects the board, but also just pays for itself in cards, and really good way to embarrass their Blade Instructor.
Oh yeah, totally. They trip over rats routinely. This next card's pretty good too. Goblin Electromancer, 2/blue for a 2/2. Instants and sorceries you cast cost 1 less to cast. It's fine.
Oh, this is definitely the card I would take at this point. It's just very, very, very good in Izzet. In both control and aggro Izzet, it does pretty much exactly what you want, even if the body is a little more relevant in the aggro deck.
Yeah. Next one, Siege Worm, 5 green for a 5/5 with Convoke, and it's got Trample. This is one I really want to talk about, Luis, because we watched a GP Montreal in the coverage this weekend. We had a chance to watch Ari Lack's draft, and he was in Celestia. It was pretty open in his seat, and he didn't seem that into Siege Worm. He passed a couple of them. He ended up wheeling one, but it clearly wasn't, something that he was prioritizing. He seemed to be much more on the super aggressive end of things. The 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop cabs deck to the bone, all the combat tricks removal spells, and wasn't as excited about, the more expensive end of the Convoke cards. He was pretty happy, I think, to run cards like Rosemane Centaur that you can power out really early, especially with that 1, 2, and then 5 curve. But Siege Worm, he didn't really seem too stoked on it. Where are you at on it?
Well, without a bunch of reliable token makers, we just have Sworn Companions, basically. Mm-hmm. There's just not that many ways to cheat out the Siege Worm, so it just becomes a pretty fair card. Like, this card is sadly comparable to Dowser of Light, the 5-mana 4/5 for 4 and a black.
Because you usually get Siege Worm on turn 5.
Right, you're more likely to get it on turn 5 than any other turn, and that just does not make it a premium card. It was a premium card in original Ravnica, that's for sure, but it's just not a card that I think is near the top for the green decks. So I'm not very, very high on Siege Worm. I would take Electromancer here.
Okay. Next card is Boros Locket. No. Notion Rain. 1 blue-black for Surveil 2, draw 2 cards, and then you take 2 damage at sorcery speed.
I do really like this card. Notion Rain is quite important for the Dimir deck. I think it's close with Electromancer. I suspect in 2 weeks I'll know for sure which one I would take. Right now I would probably take Notion Rain, but I'm open to that being wrong.
Yeah, I'm definitely taking Notion Rain at this point. I'll just go to the back of the pack for our gate. It's Selesnya Guild Gate, so we'll just keep that in mind. Yeah. Uncommons, Join Shields. Oh boy, this one's real bad.
Wildly unplayable. It's 3 green, white, instant give all your creatures indestructible hexproof on a turn.
Yeah, and you untap them, but yeah, it's terrible. Really bad. So we're not going to be playing that. Next one also hasn't really made much of an impact. Creeping Chill. 3 and a black sorcery, drain your opponent for 3. But if you mill it from your library into your graveyard, you can cast it for free.
Yeah. Until we start doing podcasts about Legacy Dredge, I don't think we're going to be
right.
all that interested in Creeping Chill.
Yeah. Hellkite Whelp, 4 and a red for a 3/3 flyer, and when it attacks you, it pings a creature your opponent controls.
I think this is probably worse than Electromancer
I do too.
In the red decks.
I do too, yeah.
Not to mention Notion Rain, but it's just funny that the uncommon flyer usually is a pretty prized slot, but I think just 5 drops are pretty replaceable here.
Me too. That's the problem. I mean, I look at Burglar Rat and I'm like, might rather have that. Okay, we do have a foil. It's a common. It's Fresh-Faced Recruit, 1 and a Boros for a 2/1, and as long as it's your turn, it has first strike. This is a fine.
I think this is a fine card. I don't think it would upset the pick order right now, though. I still think I'd take Notion Rain.
Now, this rare is Selesnya split card. It's Assure Assemble. So Assure is 2 Selesnya mana for an instant. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It gets indestructible until end of turn. And Assemble is an instant for 4 green-white where you get 3 2/2 vigilance creatures.
I like this card a lot. It's a great combat trick in the early to middle of the game, or even the late game. I mean, if they try to kill your creature with a removal spell, or you get into combat, you just get to bam, and you get a +1/+1 counter that sticks around. And then 6 mana for 6/6 worth of stats is pretty nice too. So I would Assure Assemble here.
I think so too. The high end on that is high. My second pick is Notion Rain though.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. Okay, let's do another one. This one comes from Raphael. He actually gave us 2. We might even get to both of them here. Oh, and of course, as always, the rares from our Crack-A-Pack go right into a little envelope. And I will send those off to not Louis Scott-Vargas at some point. I wait till he gets a nice little... I like it when people get something, has a nice little chunk of cards in there. And you also get an LR deck box, LR sleeves, and an LR sticker with that too. And the only way to become eligible for such things is just to become a patron. That's it. Hunted Witness is our first card out of the second pack. White for a 1/1. When it dies, you get a 1/1 lifelinker. I think this card's real low impact.
Yeah, it's playable if you have a ton of synergy cards with it, but in general, you're not going to put this card in your deck. Yeah,
this meets the requirement of card I'm relieved when I see my opponent plays rather than card that I'm going, uh-oh. Vidalcan Mesmerist also kind of meets that qualification. It's 1 and a blue for a 2/1. Whenever it attacks, you can have opposing creature get -2/-0 until end of turn.
In the aggressive Izzet decks, I think this card has a place, but it's not a card you need to take early.
Yeah, and its place is it's a 2-drop.
I mean, so look at it this way. This applies to more than just Mesmerist. When you have a a monocolored card, it can generally go into 2 guilds, right?
Mm-hmm.
If those get so that if one of those guilds just doesn't want it, you're already at half the people don't want it, so you can get those late, and it's almost a gold card. Like I think 1 out of 8 Dimir decks or something would want this card,
right?
And then
it's desperation curve filler,
right? You just need a 2-drop or something, and then it's exacerbated by the fact that the control Izzet deck also doesn't want it. So you're talking one person every other draft or something like that wants this card, which is a card that even if your deck wants it, you're probably the only one. So you can float it for almost anything.
Boy, this pack has been. Next is Fearless Halberdier, 2 and a red for a 3/2.
Well, appropriately to flavor, the Fearless Halberdier is a member of no guilds and also wanted by no guilds.
Yes, exactly. This next one too, Wary Okapi. God, we're lighting it up.
Yeah, 3 mana, 3/2 vigilance. Not very good.
Dowser of Lights.
Oh, there we go.
We're on a heater.
I do think this card is playable in Dimir.
I was going to say that. I was going to say, look, I want to make fun of it because it's like along the lines of janky cards nobody wants. But Dowser of Lights has earned a little of my respect. If you need a 5 and you're in black, you can play it.
I would say that the first Dowser I play almost all the time, and sometimes I play 2.
Yeah, it turns out 4/5 just slots into the format nicely. So currently our pick is Dowser of Lights. All right, how about this one? Righteous Blow. White instant does 2 damage to an attacking or blocking creature. I've been not super impressed by Righteous Blow.
I would probably Dowser over this. It's just Righteous Blow is just not that good.
It's really not that good. No, it's weird because this is a type of tool that some of the more controlling decks want, but White does not touch a controlling deck, generally speaking. So not so great. And if you're trying to use this, and from a Boros standpoint, it allows your opponent to block first, which means that creature didn't get through, which isn't really what you want to be doing. All right, this next one, get out of here, Dowser of Lights. Deadweight.
Oh, yeah. Deadweight is awesome. Not only is Deadweight just a premium removal spell, I think it's the premium removal spell. I would prefer Deadweight over Deadly Visit. I think that you're supposed to take the
you've got it above it. Ooh, I like that. Okay, that's interesting. I think you're supposed to still have Deadly Visit, but...
the way your curves end up looking, Deadweight is just so much better, and it's just the nuts against Boros. It's good against all the guilds, because it has targets everywhere, but it's the straight-up nuts against Boros. And I've not found that my Dimir decks lose because of a lack of things to do on turn 5. So
it's a good point. You get Capture Sphere in there too. And,
Watcher in the Mist. Mm-hmm. Like you just can't play a deck with 2 Deadly Visit, 2 Watcher in the Mist, and like 2 Capture Sphere and end up, actually doing something. No, you're right.
No, the cost on Deadweight. Also, I've been in many situations recently where if I happen to get my hands on a second or God forbid a third Deadweight, I'll just be on the draw.
Oh yeah, this has been
that a lot.
A debate that Ben Stark has been having on Twitter is he's just in favor of drawing all the time almost.
Oh, is he? Oh, that's interesting. I usually look for a nudge in that direction.
He's not going to draw with his aggro Boros decks, but he's found that most of the non-aggro decks want to draw. So yeah, I would certainly slam Deadweight here. It's one of the best commons, if not. Well, I don't want to call it the best yet because I generally find that to me not super useful, but I think that it's one of the best commons, and I would probably take the first 2 Deadweights over Deadly Visit if it came down to it.
Okay, wait. What did you just mean when you said you don't want to you don't like it if somebody says this is the best common, gavel down, we're done here, case is closed? Yeah,
partially because it's a little early, partially because it tends to not matter after your first 2 or so picks what the rating was, because if my first 2 picks were both low curve cards, then I would be less inclined to take Deadweight over something else. And it just becomes irrelevant so quickly.
Yeah. The reason why I wanted to point that out was just because there's so much information out there right now that tends to be kind of grandstanding or that kind of thing. You need to know that Deadweight is one of the best, commons.
Definitely one of the best, but I think one of the best is a useful enough qualifier.
Exactly.
Saying
that's what you need to
literally
know.
The best. Yeah.
Right.
So in any case, we're taking Deadweight.
Yeah, Deadweight right now. Undercity Uprising is next. 2 green-black for a sorcery. Creatures you control gain Death Touch, and you can have one of them fight.
Yeah, so in any case, we're taking Deadweight.
Yeah, still that one's gone. All right, this next one's pretty good. Parhelion Patrol has been good. It turns out that the mentor part isn't super critical, but it can come up. But flying is just still very good. It's 3 and a white for a 2/3 flying vigilance with mentor. Also, I've been able to put a +1/+1 counter on it frequently enough that a 3/4 flying vigilance all of a sudden is a big problem for my opponent.
Yeah, flying is really good in this format. There's just
it really
a number of decks that will just go off the ground, so having a flyer is really valuable.
Yeah, I'm still not passing deadweight. Another Boros Locket, no. Might of the Masses are our first uncommon. I should say our Guild Gate is a Boros Guild Gate. Might of the Masses, green instant, target creature gets +1/+1 for each creature you control.
Yeah,
Do you view this as a big payoff for Celestia?
No. It's the same reason that Siege Worm isn't awesome. I just think that Might of the Masses just does not deliver most of the time.
Yeah, it's a fine combat trick.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, it's playable, but it's not like an awesome uncommon that you're going to first pick and be happy about.
Right. All right, this one's pretty good. Discovery Dispersal. This is one in a Dimir for a sorcery, surveil 2, then draw a card. Dispersal is 3 blue-black. For an instant, each opponent returns an online permanent they control with the highest converted mana cost among permanents they control to its owner's hand, and then they discard a card.
I have found that this card is just preordain, 85% of the time. But but preordain's good because Dimir has tons of like surveil matters cards, and then when you do cast Dispersal, it's very good. So,
yep,
I like this card. I would take Deadweight over it though. I still think Deadweight's better.
I do too. It's just more impactful. All right, here. Oh, okay. Here we go. We're going to put you, Luis, to the Dimir test. So our last uncommon is City Watch Sphinx, 5 and a blue for a 5/4 flyer. When it dies, you surveil 2.
Yeah,
is that enough to knock Deadweight off the list?
No, I'm still taking Deadweight. So look,
you just don't want a 6-drop, right?
Yeah, here's the big thing: is that City Watch Sphinx might be a little better than Watcher in the Mist. I'm not even sure it is, but let's say it is. The difference between those two is not even close to the difference between Deadweight and the next best like 1 or 2 mana spell. Like if you end up with a Dimir deck that's like, well, my defensive early plays are Child of Night and Wall of Mist versus I have 2 Deadweights. It's not even close to which one actually is more effective.
Right.
So I'd rather take the Deadweights and figure out what your 5-drops are later. Like, even if it ends up being that you're playing 2 Dowser of Light, those are still pretty good. Those will close out games. You won't get to those games if you don't have the couple Deadweights. And Deadweight makes Notion Ring that much better.
Yep, it does. You don't take that early damage. And yeah, you can play it on turn 4 and find your Deadweight. But you mentioned it just briefly, but I have to say, at this point, I do have Watcher in the Mist higher than City Watch Sphinx. The 4 toughness being the same, the 2 power is, in my experience, not the irrelevant part of the creature. And then the fact that you get the Surveil 2 right now has been way better for me than City Watch Sphinx. Even though City Watch Sphinx on paper, looked better to me at first, I think I'd rather just have Watcher every time. The difference between 5 and 6 mana is huge. And what you get extra isn't that great. It's basically just 2 power. And otherwise it's just worse. Okay. I think I can talk you off the Deadweight ledge here. Thief of Sanity?
Oh yeah, this card's amazing. This is 1 blue-black for a 2/2 flyer. When it hits the opponent, you look at their top 3 cards, exile 1 of them, and put the other 2 in their graveyard. Mm-hmm. And then the cards that are exiled, you get to cast without caring about their color requirements. Yeah. Even if the thief dies, you still get to cast
even if thief dies. Yeah,
you can't play lands because it says cast. But yeah, this card's amazing. It's a combo of it mills them for 3 and it lets you basically surveil 3 off their deck. And
that's the crazy part about it. Is it like it often just mills them out too? Like you've got 3 cards in the bank, but you're milling them. They're combined with their draw step and your Thief of Sanity hits its 4 cards a turn. Like it doesn't take that long to just mill them out. Card's great. I went off with it today in the stream. And I should mention that too. I probably should do a better job with that. But I have been streaming for Wizards on their channel 2 p.m. To 5 p.m. Pacific time at twitch.tv/magic. I stream drafting. So I did that today and we went off with Thief of Sanity. In fact, I had a great sequence, Lisa. You would have loved it. I played Thief of Sanity. My opponent immediately killed it. And I said, all right, well, primary game plan then is to draw Devious Cover Up, eventually counter something with it, shuffle back in the Thief of Sanity, redraw it at some point, and then start attacking with it. That's exactly what I did. So that's a good deck, when you can call your shot that way. By the way, ultra rare. We've got my tried and true method, put the cards in the arena. Thief of Sanity somehow came out ahead. That never happens. So good job, Thief of Sanity. All right, let's do one more. We'll kind of cruise through this one, though.
Alrighty.
All right. This one's also, by the way, from Raphael. Very giving soul he was. All right. Ornery Goblin. This card's been good. One in a red for a 2/1. Whenever it blocks or becomes blocked by a creature, it pings that creature for 1. It's a good 2-drop. This is one of the ones I actually like quite a bit for Boros.
It is solid.
Loxodon Restore, 4 white for a 3/4 with Convoke. When it ETBs, you gain 4 life. It's been fine. It's a playable, but I'd rather have the Goblin. Here we go. Dimir Informant, 2 and a blue for a 1/4 Surveil 2. I like that. I would take that over the Goblin, but I've been pretty high on Dimir. Pax Favor, 2 and a green for an instant with Convoke. Target creature gets +3/+3. Have not seen much of this.
Like this card a whole lot.
Yeah, it doesn't seem very good. Veiled Shade, I mentioned that one earlier. This is a 2 and a black 2/2. You can pay 1 and a black to pump it. I am not a particularly big fan of it, but I have found myself with that card in my deck multiple times, and it's okay. It does things. Threat of activation is real. In a control deck, you can make it into an 8/8 or whatever.
I don't like this as much as Dowser, though, because it's not like playing on turn 3, it does anything. I think it's just reliably bigger to play the Dowser.
Definitely. Garrison Sergeant, 3 white red for a 3/3. If you control a gate, it gets double strike. No, that card has not been performing. You mentioned earlier 5-drops are pretty interchangeable. You have to have a gate. It's in a Boros deck. Yes, you do run some gates in a Boros deck, but they're a cost you have to pay to make sure that you always have your mana on turn 2, turn 3, that kind of thing, and you don't want to have to run enough of them to make Garrison Sergeant actually good. Been very disappointed by that one.
Oh, yeah, this card is quite bad.
Yeah, it's bad. Muse Drake, 3 and a blue for a 1/3 flyer when ETBs draw a card. Found this card to be just straight line playable. It's just good, like fine. I'm never excited about it, but I always find it to be good, and I'll put him in my deck.
Yeah, I agree. That's exactly how I describe it.
Yeah, I like Dimir Informant a little better though. Celestia Locket, no. All right, get out of here, Dimir Informant. Deadweight. Oh, how about this? Here, our first uncommon. Going head-to-head with Deadweight and just slapping it out of the way. It's Lava Coil.
Oh, yeah, Lava Coil is much better. This is 1 and a red. Sorcery, deal 4 to a creature within exile it if it's going to die.
Yeah, it's so good.
Super efficient. It can kill 5-drops.
Dude, it can kill City Watch Sphinx.
Yeah.
Is that not the most depressing thing, by the way?
They don't even get to surveil. Yeah.
They don't surveil either. It's like, oh my God.
There's a pretty easy Lava Coil here.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll tell you what will not be overtaking it. Grappling Sundew. Why are you here, Grappling Sundew? 1 and a green for an 0/4 Defender Reach, and you can pay 5 mana to give it indestructible. No. Okay, this card's really good. I would still take Lava Coil over it, but I've been super impressed by We Dragonauts. Really one of the best payoffs for Izzet. 1 blue-red for a 1/3 flyer. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Very often a 3/3 flyer for 3.
Yeah, it's great. It's no Lava Coil, but it's good.
Yeah, it's really good. The thing about Lava Coil, of course, perhaps stating the obvious, but you can play Lava Coil in both Boros or Izzet, and it will excel for you where We Dragonauts is committing you in that way. Izzet Guildgate is our Guildgate. We have a foil common. It's Unexplained Disappearance, 1 and a blue for an instant. Return target creature to its owner's hand, surveil 1. I like that card a lot, but not nearly as much as Lava Coil. Ooh, this one's nice. All right, we got a little fight here, Luis. Blood Operative, 1 black for a 3/1 lifelink. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile target card from a graveyard whenever you surveil. If it's in your graveyard, you can pay 3 life and return it to your hand.
Oh, yeah.
It's been very good.
I've liked this card a decent amount more than Lava Coil, just because it's a great threat on its own. It's not like a 3/1 lifelink is going to, knock down the door or anything like that, but it is good enough on its own that your opponent has to deal with it, and then it just comes back very easily. You also get to surveil it, then immediately pick it back up, and the Dimir decks that I tend to end up with can bring us back 5-6 times pretty easily.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that as we go in here. Let's move into now our main topic, which is going to be sort of a big picture view on our first impressions, of course, for the guilds. So I've been, for my personal, the way that I've been trying to figure out these things is when I look at one of the guilds, I figure out what's the baseline strategy for the guild. Is it an aggressive deck? Is it a control deck? Is it a mid-range deck? How good is it at that strategy, and how consistent is that strategy? Right. So I just try to get a super high level baseline. Hey, Boros is trying to be aggressive. How good is it? It's pretty darn good. How consistent? It's pretty consistent. That's it gets high marks across the board for sticking to its plan, where some of the other ones are a little bit well, what am I supposed to be doing here? And then the other one is, how does the guild signature mechanic interact with that baseline strategy? Because some of them feel not super well supported and some are. So again, in the case of Boros, for example, how does Mentor interact with its primary game plan of being the aggressor? turns out pretty darn good. You get a
Oh,
+1/+1 counter on an attacking creature, and you're in business.
Same with Surveil.
Yes, and Surveil as well. And so we'll get into that. So that's sort of the big picture framing that I've been doing, and that's what I had in mind when I wanted to talk about each of these guilds. So I ranked the guilds, but I want to know if you're aligned with what I've been seeing, or if you have a different take on it, Luis, because we're still pretty early. So I have Dimir and Izzet as number one. Sure, I could, press hard, and I guess I would say Dimir number one, but I have them very close to each other, and I'm really happy with either or even a combination of both of those. Second, I have Boros. Then I have Selesnya, and then multiple leagues further down, I have Golgari. Where are you at on the big picture rankings right now?
Yeah, so there's two things. The first is that I generally agree with the order you've laid out. Mm-hmm. But the second is that I think that it's important to know we're not talking about Battle for Zendikar green, right? If you remember that format, a lot of people, including Owen, when he was on this show, said, I would never draft green. You should never put a green card in your deck. Mm-hmm. I don't think we're even close to that. And in fact, I think that a lot of the wins you'll get in this format are finding out which guild is open. Since I don't see as big of a gap as you do. I think Golgari is the worst, but I don't actually see a big gap there. And I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up overtaking Selesnya. So I think that what you're trying to do in this format is not only learn how to draft each guild, when we're going to go over that, but find which guild is the open guild, because you're just going to get hooked up. If you can end up in one of the guilds that you're the only one drafting it, you're really going to reap the benefits, and all the guilds are good in that situation. Even Golgari, even Selesnya. I mean,
if you're the only one,
right? If you're getting 7th pick gold cards of your guild, you're going to have a good deck. It's not as good as maybe the best Dimir deck or the best Boros deck. Maybe the best Boros deck is just the best deck. I don't know, but I think that it is really important to find which one's open. That said, yeah, Dimir. One of the reasons I really like it is I feel like it's really consistent in terms of how good the deck ends up. You end up with, I think you end up with a good Dimir deck a lot, just because it's got a lot of really interchangeable pieces. The same is not quite as true for some of the other guilds.
Yeah. I mean, Dimir for me, and we'll start there, has been consistently good as well. And I think it's just because of how incidentally good Surveil is. If we listed the raw power level of each of the mechanics, I don't think that Surveil would be the first one, or even maybe the second. Scrying's good, right? We all love a good scry, but it doesn't even affect the board directly on its own. And, you're getting some incidental value by putting stuff in the graveyard, but it's not all the time. But the thing is that it's everywhere, right? You just get it essentially for free on a ton of cards you'd play anyway, like Deadly Visit, right? You're going to play 3 black to destroy a creature. It's throw in Surveil too. I'm in. Dimir Informant, a 1/4, right? You might want a little more than that, but sure, you're going to let me Surveil for a couple as well. Great. House Guild Mage, you can repeat it. Notion Rain, again, you're wanting to do the draw 2 cards thing anyway, and now you're just getting even deeper. Price of Fame, I mean, I'm kind of surprised they tacked it on the Price of Fame, to be honest. Bounce Spell, Unexplained Disappearance. It's just here, have, just chuck you a free Surveil in there. Watcher in the Mist, 3/4 flyer. I want that anyway, right? Well, all of these cards, just toss it in for free.
Yeah, well, it's just because it's contextual. It's you can't look at the mechanics written down and know how good each one's going to be, because it just matters what cards they put it on. And like you said, they put Surveil for free or at very low cost on a bunch of already good cards, and as a result, the Surveil cards are pretty good. In addition to that, there's a ton of good payoffs for Surveil. Right. So you end up playing a mechanic that's good already, doesn't cost you much on cards, and has a bunch of good payoffs. So as a result, yeah, the Surveil deck is good. Surveil also happens to feed itself quite nicely, where Surveil cards find more Surveil cards and whatnot.
Yeah, I actually did a search for this, Luis. There are 21 cards in the set that let you Surveil.
Yeah, and so
21.
I think there's 28 cards that say Surveil, so that means there's 7 cards that pay you off for Surveil.
Right,
at least 7 cards.
And I actually wanted to do that. I made the common and uncommon Surveil payoff power rankings, and I ended up doing power rankings for each of these. But I want to get your take on these as well. My number one payoff as of right now is Disinformation Campaign. This might be love, Luis. This card is just so sweet. I love it so much.
for the CFB newsletter this week, I put together the 5 most nonsense ways to lose in this format, and one of them on the list was just your opponent playing disinformation campaign, because you're sitting there on a good 5-drop, a good 6-drop, 2 removal spells. You're feeling good. They play that, and you're just like, oh yeah, I'm not winning this game.
Yeah, they've got a good game plan, and it is a little slow against Boros. It's not a perfect Magic card, but to me, this is the most powerful long game plan. Next one I have is Dimir Spybug. This comes out on turn 2, and it's a real problem for the opponent.
I do like this order. I wouldn't be surprised if Spybug goes above Disinformation Campaign in some of the decks, I think the decks with multiple Spybugs probably win more than the decks that are built around Disinformation Campaign, but they're both very good, both very close.
Yeah, Dimir Spybug's just so much more directly affecting of how the game plays out, where there are times when Disinformation Campaign can feel a bit slow. Darkblade Agent's next. That's the common, the 2/3 that can get Death Touch and draws you a card when it hits your opponent. I've just found triggering this card has not been difficult, and just as a card, it's pretty darn good. I mean, even instant speed triggering it on a block isn't the worst case scenario, but if you ever get to start hitting with it, it spirals out of control pretty quickly for the opponent.
Oh yeah, makes Dazzling Lights awesome.
It really does, yeah, because it just always turns it on. Thoughtbound Phantasm is my next one. There's only 2 left. The last one I have is Whispering Snitch. The Phantasms actually impressed me a lot. I played on turn 2, and it solves a lot of the problems that I'm interested in solving at that point. And even if you draw it in the middle part of the game, you can grow it up to big enough and start attacking. Yeah, and then Whispering Snitch has been fine.
Yeah, I think the Snitch is mediocre, but it's playable in the really heavy Surveil decks, which, to be honest, are most of the Surveil decks end up being heavy Surveil because you just have it on all your cards.
That's right. One thing that I noticed was all 3 of the counter spells for this guild have been good and sealed, and I've even played all 3 of them in a draft, and I probably would again. Devious Cover-Up even has been fine. I looked at it and thought it was pretty bad, but now I'll play one and I'm fine with it.
During the set review, I'm like, yeah, Devious Cover-Up is probably mediocre, but if you have 2, you can loop them. That'd be a funny joke. Turns out that's actually just a legitimate strategy. It's
super a thing. It really is. I mentioned it on the stream today. I had 2 of them. And I told my opponents, you don't have any win conditions. I'm like, I have 2 win conditions. I am just going to grind my opponents into dust, and I'm going to shuffle my good stuff back into my library, and off I go. And that's exactly what I did. It really works.
Yeah, and even setting that part aside, counterspells are just good against enough of the guilds. They're good against Control Golgari, they're good against Control Celestia or Midrange Celestia, good against every Dimir deck, basically, and good against the Control Izzet deck, and even decent against the Aggro Izzet deck, because that deck's trying to set something up. So counterspells are quite good, and as a result, this is the format where I think that the best they've ever been. You just play 4-mana counterspell some amount of the time, and that's something you'd never play in most formats.
Yeah, and what's it called? Disdainful Stroke. I've been playing that and been really happy with it too. Somebody pointed out I can't remember where on Twitter or somewhere, conversation maybe that, the last time when we had it in cons or whatever was like a morph set. So it whiffed a lot on the cards that ended up being the big impactful plays because they just paid the morph cost. But here that's not the case. And, the fact that there's this uncommon run of the, blue, red, or whatever cards, and it just counters all those is really nice. I've liked it quite a bit. And then Sinister Sabotage has been fine too. Decking can be a problem with some of these Dimir decks. The what's it called is actually the Devious Cover-Up's actually pretty good at keeping you from.
I had a Control Dimir deck that had 2 Devious Cover-Ups in it. I'm like, it's my win condition. I played against a Boros deck and I sided both out because counterspells are pretty bad against Boros. And then I got decked. It's right. So, because I had other win conditions, but they were just all in the bottom, 6 cards of my deck, and I just couldn't finish the game in time. Yeah. So, decking is a problem. Keep it in mind. Well, it's a problem that actually has implications on playing against Dimir also, where Drowned Secrets, the 1 in a blue enchantment at rare that says whenever you play a blue card, mill them for 2. This is a card you can consider main decking and is a fantastic sideboard card. I've sided this in multiple times against Dimir decks or Control Izzet deck, where you just play this and they're just like, and they can't actually beat you before you just mill them out, even if you don't have tons of blue spells.
Yeah. Yeah, so keep that in mind. Dazzling Lights has overperformed for me, especially with one of the 4 Death Touch creatures in these colors, which is Hired Poisoner, Pitiless Gorgon, Night Veil, Predator, and Darkblade Agent.
The Mondo combo of Death Touch plus this combat trick solves the problem of the trick, which is that your doesn't make your creature kill their creature any better. Mm-hmm. But Death Touch creatures, of course, do kill them immediately. And then the fact that it's Surveil at instant speed and Surveil 2, not just 1, it just makes it enough of a good card. You don't even feel that bad when you're using it to prevent 3 damage. Like,
yeah. Because when you do that, you need it. Yeah.
Because the other thing about the Dimir deck is it has enough card draw that sometimes burning cards to Surveil will find you your Notion Reigns and you get back into it right away.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's been my number 1. Let's move on to Is It.
For me, one more thing I wanted to talk about on Dimir is that
go for it.
Sideboarding has been really important. And this actually goes for all the guilds, but it's especially important for the guilds that have a lot of optionality with how they can try to close out a game. Like, look, your Boros deck is going to do your Boros deck things. It's you're not really going to change that. Like, you could, when you sideboard, maybe you'll side 1 to 2 cards because you're adjusting against the cards you've seen, but you're not siding on 7 cards and trying a different strategy. That's just not very reasonable. Dimir can totally do that. Dimir can try to board in a bunch of dowsers and go a little bigger than it was doing before. It can board in up to 5 counter spells if you have that many. It can board in cards like Never Happened. And you really have to adjust to what your opponent is doing and maybe adjust your game plan. If your opponent has something like Drowned Secrets, you're like, okay, I've got to put in my Bartizan Bats and put in my Veiled Shade and actually focus on closing the game out. There are definitely matchups where you're siding out Deadweight despite it being an awesome card. So this format has struck me as very high on the sideboarding scale, where there's tons of playables and the decks have a lot of ways to adjust not only the individual cards, but their overall game plans.
I've had that same experience. Is it? So from a big picture perspective, from what I've seen, Is It has the highest ceiling of all the guilds. Like, when you get a great Is It deck, it can feel kind of hard to lose with it. Like, the cards just are so powerful when the deck lines up correctly. Jumpstart has proven to be a solid value mechanic. It doesn't feel broken or whatever, but it's very good. And it's actually the payoffs for casting instants and sorceries that are driving force behind many of the Jumpstart cards being in the deck. Like Radical Idea, for example, isn't a great card on its own, but there's so many different cards that care about instants and sorceries, either in the graveyard, exile, or just having cast them, that it really makes it important. I think you mentioned it too. There's kind of 2 different builds on Is It, right? There's like an aggressive one that can sort of just not really care what you're doing so much and kill you out of nowhere. But then there's also a more controlling version. Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of interesting thing about Is It, because Jumpstart would be very easy to fall into like, yep, here's a control Is It deck. This is going to be like the blue-red flashback deck in Innistrad, or, whatever you want to end up as. But there's an actual legitimate aggro deck, and it's a kind of cool one because it uses cards like, Sonic Assault and Maximize Altitude to just kind of cheese your opponent out with your kind of janky creatures, your Piston Fist Cyclops and Wee Dragonauts and whatnot.
So, it's all about cheesing them out. I mean, the Gravitic Punch is like the cheesiest.
Like, your opponent's at 16. You're like, I'm going to Sonic Assault you and then attack and Gravitic Punch and then flashback Gravitic Punch. And it's just like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, your Wee Dragonaut says 12 power or whatever, and I'm dead. Yeah. Okay, fine. Yeah, and so you do need to kind of understand the difference between the two. We'll get into that at some point as well. But like you said, it can win games completely out of nowhere. In fact, it did this weekend to win GP Montreal. Just you're dead.
The Gravitic Punch, which I thought the Is It player should have sided out, did end up defeating Boros in game 3.
Yeah. What about the payoffs? Because the payoffs have been, to me, the real focal point of the deck. Because you can surround these cards with a whole bunch of different options as far as instants and sorceries go. Some better than others, but if you don't have these payoffs, it kind of doesn't matter. The number 1 for me has been Murmuring Mystic. Is It? This card is just completely stupid.
Well, I think this card's awesome in Dimir and even better in Is It.
Yeah, I think it's good in Dimir. I think that your average number of birds produced in Dimir is going to be something like 2, right? Which is good. I mean, that's a good card. Good. Like, you would always play it, right? But like here, it's like 6 or so. It's just stupid. Like, if it survives, it dominates the board. Like, it is. Yeah, it's my early pick for a Mythic Uncommon. Murmuring Mystic has been an absolute all-star performer, specifically in these decks, but yeah, you'll put it anywhere you can really cast it. Number 2, I have Wee Dragonauts.
Yeah, it's Evasion. Like a better Piston Fist Cyclops.
Yeah, which is, by the way, number 3. But Wee Dragonauts, the ability to add power to it per spell and have it be evasive is really, really good.
Deal 7 to your opponent, then or you go like spell, Gravitic Punch, and then attack them for 7. It just does a lot of awesome stuff.
Yeah, really, really powerful. Very scary, by the way. I mean, if my opponent goes turn 3 Wee Dragonauts, they got 5 cards in their hand, I'm like, oh man, I hope I have an answer. And by the way, don't get cute. Kill the thing if you can.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, don't wait around. Leapfrog, I have that above.
We're just getting worse and worse Piston Fist Cyclops.
Yes, we are.
Leapfrog is the worst version of all of these cards, but it's still good. It's a 3-mana 3/1 flyer in the Izzet deck, and can just chip your opponent down pretty quickly.
Yeah, then I have Fire Urchin over Smelt Ward Minotaur and Electrostatic Field. I don't know, whatever. Like you could put these in any order, and I probably wouldn't argue with you.
Yeah, I actually have been liking the Minotaur in Boros a decent amount. If you end up in the Boros deck that has like 5 spells or something, you don't need to trigger it very many times for it to pay off.
Yeah, especially if it's like if you're playing like Lava Coil in Boros and you're just like kill that thing can't block. I mean, it's like, you know, temporarily getting rid of 2 creatures is a huge deal in Boros because of the mentor mechanic. Let's see, we already talked about that. What about sideboarding with Izzet? So
this is the deck that I think gains the most out of sideboarding, because Izzet is tricky because there are 2 different decks, 2 distinct different decks. There are different, you know, if you go on a scale from 1 to 10, right, control on one side, aggro on the other, every guild is going to have decks that fall on different places on the scale. You can have a slightly more aggressive Dimir deck or a slightly more controlling Selesnya deck. Izzet's the only guild that reliably has like decks that are like a 2 or a 3 and decks that are like a, 8 through 10. Like it's the only one with like a differential of 5 or 6 points between its most aggressive and most controlling decks. And what that means is sometimes you're going to be able to sideboard and really trick your opponent. Because imagine you have an Izzet deck and you have 16 cards you're going to play in either deck. And these are, your good cards, your direct currents, and you're lucky enough to have Murmuring Mystic, Goblin Electromancer, the cards that are good in both. What you do with your last 7 cards can really dictate how the deck plays out and what its goals are. And your opponent doesn't know which one you're going to show up with next game. They're going to assume you show up with whatever you had in the first game. So you start this aggressive Izzet deck, and your opponent goes to sideboard, and you've switched to control, and they've boarded in some like cheat blockers and cards that are looking to split on your aggressive start, and then you just board it into 2 counter spells, and you're going to win the game with some 6-drop. Or the other way around, you start with a really good control Izzet deck, a bunch of Hypothesizzles and City Watch Sphinx and all this other stuff. Your opponent's like, got exactly what I need. Board in up to 5 counter spells, and you just board it into a bunch of Fire Urchins, Leapfrogs, and Electromancers. And they're just like, oh. So
it's such a good counterpunch.
So what you should be drafting, I think, when you're drafting is first of all, if you have one deck that's really dominant, draft to make that deck the best you can. Don't get too cute here. But once you hit a point where you have a very good version, of either the control or aggro deck, I would intentionally try to take cards to let you switch versions, because there will be people who are going to have trouble sideboarding against you when you're able to do that.
Okay. Yeah, that's really so. Like, pick up Leapfrogs even if you think you're going to be controlling.
Right. If you have 2 Leapfrogs, a Sonic Assault, a Gravitic Punch, and you have the 2 Piston Fist Cyclops you're going to play in either version in your main deck, you can turn into an aggro deck with decent success.
You really can. Yeah, you can cheese them out with that for sure. Should we move on to Boros?
Oh, yeah. Boros is, it's the most one-track guild. This is the one that I haven't really seen a control Boros deck yet. I could believe that the cards could line up such that such a thing would exist. Haven't really seen it. It's basically, as advertised, it's play hopefully a 1-drop Messenger or Healer's Hawk. I also want to call it Messenger Hawk. Healer's Hawk is very important for this. It's one of the better commons, actually. Into 2-drop into Sky Knight Legionnaire, because that's the best 3-drop, of course. Into a removal spell and a combat trick. That's really what it's trying to do. It's trying to get a little cute with Mentor, to go down the line, but really you're just trying to curve out and just beat the crap out of your opponent. You're not really going to change up that game plan.
No, and I mean, when I think of this deck, I think of it's kind of the fun police, right? Like, this is a deck that says, hey, you don't have time to fuss around with multiple colors, a bunch of tap lands, a bunch of cards that don't really do anything. Like, we're going to get you dead. And this deck plays out in a Cab's way, right? Cards that affect the board state. Almost every card in these good Boros decks is either a creature, combat trick, or removal spell. And there's a heavy emphasis, of course, on mana curve. It's just absolutely critical with 1-drops, like you mentioned, Healer's Hawk playing a big role. Because, once Healer's Hawk picks up even just 1+1/+1 counter, it's like a real card that they have to really deal with. Just on its own, it's like, no, okay, like you can kind of ignore it to a point, but it's really easy to get a +1/+1 counter on it. And then it's a problem. Like, it's a, 2 power lifelink in the air really adds up quickly, especially considering that they got to play it on turn 1. So it didn't affect the meteor part of their curve. You mentioned Sky Knight Legionnaire has just been awesome. All right. I wanted to do power rankings for the 2-drops, the common, uncommon 2-drops here. I had Legion Guildmage as number 1, with Boros Challenger as number 2. You said you prefer Boros Challenger?
Yeah, I think it's pretty close, but I'd rather have the card that can brawl a lot better on turn 2, and then it snowballs a lot better because it has Mentor as well. Legion Guildmage is, of course, a better card in the late game, a better fallback, but I think Boros would rather just have the more aggressive card to start with.
Okay. Then I had Sunhome Stalwart. That's the 2/2 first strike for 2 with Mentor. Just solid, uncommon. Goblin Crater Maker is next. That's the one that, you can sacrifice it to blow up a colorless permanent or whatever, however they worded it, or do 2 damage to a creature. And then above the next section, though, are kind of just like the bread and butter common 2-drops. And I have Ornery Goblin at the top of that list. Then I have Fresh Face Recruit, Skyline Scout, and then it kind of falls off dramatically after that with Fire Urchin.
The rest are what we talk about when we say replacement level.
Exactly, yeah. But you actually think that Fresh Face Recruit's a little better than Ornery Goblin.
I believe I said Orn Dog, actually. If
you did say the Orn Dog.
Yeah, I think that it just does better with a Mentor counter. Because the Ornery Goblin, yes, clears out X1s and does do a good job. There are some boards where Ornery Goblin's definitely better, but a 3/2 first strike is a lot harder to stop than Ornery Goblin, even a 3/2 Ornery Goblin. So I think for Boros' purposes, I like the Recruit better, though they're both clearly better than the next tier. So
yeah, it's funny because it shows our proclivities. Like, the reason why I like Ornery Goblin is because it trades for 3 toughness creatures. Like, even without being helped. I just wanted to stand on its own, I guess. So it's kind of funny how that is. Mentors has been really powerful. We talked about it in the set review, but it's hard to, it seems like not much. You're just like, what? It's a +1/+1 counter, big deal. It is a big deal. It just completely changes combat. Even triggering Mentor one time onto another creature can have a dramatic impact on how the game plays out, allowing you to continue attacking and leveraging your cheaper combat tricks and that type of thing. So don't overlook it. I mean, I think anybody who's played with or against Boros gets how it works. It's not a complicated strategy, but to me, it has been firmly in that tier right below the top 2 guilds that I have there. That leads us into Celestia. And it's interesting. I mentioned it, watching Ari draft, and we'll talk about it here, but it's been a little disappointing to me, I guess. The question that I have now is, are we supposed to be drafting a mid-range style Convoke deck to take advantage of like Siege Worm, like we talked about before, or, Flight of Equinox or something like that? Or are we supposed to be trying to like force this kind of wannabe Boros deck that's like super fast, green-white aggro with Healer's Hawks and Iron Shell Beetles and that kind of stuff? And, I mentioned earlier about how Ari drafted his deck. It was open for him, but he really, really wanted to do it. And I could see his logic, right? Because the mid-range Celestia decks, they just don't seem to quite have the right tools to finish the job. Like, you can do the thing the deck's trying to do and still lose, where other guilds don't feel that way. If you do what Boros is trying to do, you're going to win a big percentage. If you get to like do the curve out, get a Mentor trigger, use a combat trick, like, you're in really good shape. If you get to go off with any of those payoffs that we mentioned in Boros, in Dimir earlier, and just start chaining stuff together, you're going to
just have a dead weight and Ocean Rain, you're already pretty far ahead of most people.
You're in good shape. Exactly. And is it, my God, especially in the aggressive version, if you do what it's trying to do, it feels like it doesn't matter what your opponent does.
Electromancer into Piston Fist Cyclops and to cast 2 Sonic Assaults and you're dead.
And they're dead, right? And with Celestia, it's like, okay, I curved out well with creatures. Then I got to play a Rosemane Centaur and a Siege Worm. And it still feels like sometimes it's like, well, I just lost anyway.
They have a Wall of Mist and they deadly visit my Siege Worm.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're staring at this bad common and your whole game plan's gone.
I do not think Celestia is particularly good. Look, it's got good cards. Like every guild, if Celestia is open and you're just picking up, the nice gold uncommons, the green, white Cavalier dude, like you've got multiple Healer's Hawks and a good like Convoke payoff. Sure, the deck's going to be good, but the average Celestia case is just a bunch of vanilla mediocre creatures. I don't.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm not sold on this Celestia aggro plan. If you could do that, what about your seat is making Boros that much worse? Like, is Iron Shell Beetle really replacing Skyknight Legionnaire?
Right.
So
right. It's just embarrassing when you try to do that.
Centaur, the Centaur Peacemaker, or 3 mana, 3/3 each player gains 4. Like, that's not a particularly good aggro card.
Mm-mm.
Whenever I'm Dimir and my opponent plays that, I feel like I've won the game. So
seriously, yeah.
I think Celestia is a little confused and. Like, Izzet has 2 distinct decks. Does Celestia has no distinct decks? I don't really know what winning Celestia decks are supposed to be looking like. And I think we're going to get more information on this. This is one of the ones I'm not as confident in. Unsurprisingly, I've tested the Izzet and Dimir decks a lot more than the Celestia decks.
Yeah,
but
same.
I also think part of that is the Celestia decks seem worse to me. Like, it seems better to be drafting the blue guilds than it does either of the green guilds. I haven't played against Celestia decks that I found particularly impressive either.
No. And when I play against them, I feel calm, cool, and collected. I feel like I'm going to be able to figure out a game plan that will beat these with all of the other decks. I mean, I respect what I think Ari was trying to do. I didn't get a chance to ask him about it. But, it seemed like he was saying, well, look, if I'm going to go for this mid-range Celestia strategy, the other decks are going to be able to combat that pretty effectively. But if I can get out to a really quick, aggressive start with Healer's Hawks and some counters and then leverage just a Convoke spell here or there, maybe I could go underneath those decks. And I can respect, that approach for sure. I just don't know if either of them are particularly good. It just feels a little bit counter to kind of the breadcrumbs left out by, R&D or whatever, right? Like, I'm supposed to flood the board with small creatures and power out the huge ones with Convoke. One of the annoying things, by the way, Luis, I did a little, we've been talking about numbers and stats and stuff and when we talk about Magic, and specifically for us in limited Magic, and how a lot of it isn't practically applicable. But I dug in a little deep here because one annoying thing that I noticed when playing this was the amount of creatures with Death Touch I seem to be facing down. And, when I'm like, ooh, I got a World Soul Colossus, it's going to be a 9/9, and it is. And my opponent's sitting there and they're staring at me with a Hired Poisoner, like, what? And even that can be the case with the Rosemane Centaur and the Siege Worm and the Arboretum Elemental. And I'm like, why does it feel like my creatures are always just dying to these little tiny 1 and 2 drops? And I looked, and it's because they are. There are 5 creatures with Death Touch in this set, and all of them are either common or uncommon. For comparison's sake, I looked up how many were in M19. There were 2. In Hour of Devastation, there was 1. There were 2 in Amonkhet. Okay, so we have way more than normal on Death Touch, and it can make for a very hostile environment if you're trying to do these big, dumb creatures on the ground thing. So if you do feel like you've been running into a lot of Death Touch, you have been.
Well, another thing, by the way, is that at Common, we have Deadly Visit, Luminous Bonds, and Capture Sphere, and all 3 of them deal with Siege Worm quite effectively.
Yeah.
It's just not a good time to be paying 5 mana for your creatures.
No, it's not. Yeah, I'm feeling off it, I will say, with these Celestia decks. I did make a Convoke power rankings. The reason I did so is because the previous 3 guilds I had made power rankings, and I didn't want to leave Celestia off, so I just made it a thing. So I'll just kind of cruise through these. The first one, Conclave Tribunal. That's the Oblivion Ring. That thing's just awesome. And then I actually have Rosemane Centaur as second on this list because at least it's 5 mana Convoke, which I really like. Like, we saw on camera a couple of times somebody went Healer's Hawk, ideally Iron Shell Beetle attack you for 2, and then turn 3 just slam Rosemane Centaur. And that's powerful. Like a 4/4 Vigilance at that stage of the game is going to be bigger than anything else on the board. And that's pretty cool. Even if it's not, the kind of threat that you can necessarily have last forever. I like that. Then I had Siege Worm because I don't know. It's maybe a little better than Flight of Equinox. Maybe Flight's just better because it flies over the Death Touch creatures, even though it costs way more mana, or 1 more mana, I mean. Then I have Loxodon Restorer, and then it's just like a bunch of jank. Sprouting Renewal, World Soul Colossus. I hate Arboretum Elemental. I haven't really found it. The only thing I liked about that is when Rock Charger picks it up for a ride. That's sweet, but otherwise I'm like, I don't want this thing. Pack's Favor. Ladev Guardian has been real bad, but of course I've got the last slot saved perfectly well for Pause for Reflection.
Oh yeah,
the absolutely terrible thing. Okay, so that brings us to our last guild to talk about here on the First Impression Show, which is Golgari. Now, I have questions for you, Luis, because I happened to catch a little bit of your stream before I crashed out on Saturday at the GP and noticed that you were toying around with this guild. In my experience, it's been bad. Like So I'm going to try to illustrate this. Undergrowth. Let's compare it to Surveil, right? Surveil makes it easy, right? It's on all the cards you wanted to play anyway, and then there's these payoffs, and off you go. Undergrowth has a relatively high setup cost. Getting creatures in the graveyard for free basically doesn't happen, right? The problem is that if you have the opportunity to discard them, like erstwhile, whatever is Trooper, you kind of don't want to, right? Because those are your spells that you're supposed to cast from your hand. If you have the opportunity to surveil them because you get to play some of the black surveil cards, you don't want to surveil them away because you want them on top of your library because those are your spells and you want to draw them and play them. What you want to do is mill them for free, air quotes, but there just aren't ways to do that outside of like Glowspore Shaman, which is the green-black 3/1. And it's uncommon, and it's also kind of not great. Like, as an enabler, you'll play it, but it's like not a great card. It's just a 3/1 with no abilities once it hits the battlefield. So even then, I'm not feeling like super excited about playing it in there. And then, this is the real kicker here, is that if you do put in the effort, if you do say, okay, fine, I'm going to surveil cards into my yard, I'm going to ditch cards to my trooper, the payoffs aren't even that great. Right? Like, even when you do it, I don't feel like I'm just dominating the game. Like, for example, if I could start the game with 3 cards in my graveyard, I don't feel like, oh, well, now my deck's just broken. This is just stupid. Like, I feel like, okay, these are pretty powerful now. Like, I'm happy to be casting these cards, but it's not like it's just a win. Right? I don't know. To me, like, all of this adds up to Golgari's kind of bad.
So we definitely disagree on the scale, if not the direction here. Like, again, okay. I have Golgari and Celestia below the other guilds. I think they are worse. I think Golgari is a little worse than Celestia, but I'm not even convinced of that yet. I think Black might be enough better. And
because you get removal and stuff?
You get removal, and that Celestia is more confused than Golgari. I think Golgari just wants to be a control deck most of the time. Though you can draft Golgari aggro if you end up there. So the main thing is just stop worrying about Undergrowth. Just
ignore that.
Going back to that stream, I was clearly the only Golgari player at the table, right? I wield 2 Golgari Fine Brokers, for example, the green, black uncommon. And then I had like 35 playables. You know what ended up getting cut? All the Undergrowth cards.
Oh, interesting. So the sick tech is to ignore Undergrowth somehow?
Like, I'm not saying you're not going to put Rhizome Lurcher in your deck, and I'm not saying that you can't build a deck that has like a couple Burglar Rats, a couple Generous Strays, and Severed Strands, and just, takes advantage of that. But don't think that Golgari is an Undergrowth deck the same way that Dimir is a Surveil deck and Boros is a Mentor deck. Green and Black has a decent amount of good cards. If Green and Black are open, you will end up with a good deck. You don't need to press this part very much. And I think the format would be better if Undergrowth was better supported. It's, kind of disappointing that we're saying, hey, this guild, ignore the guild mechanic, because that leaves you without a handhold, and it makes the guild a little less interesting. You're just playing good cards. But there are good cards. If you just have identified these colors are open, and then you're getting, 6th and 7th pick gold cards, and you spend your early picks on like Deadweights and Crawl Harpooners and Generous Strays, you're just going to have a good deck. And I think that Golgari is perfectly serviceable. So don't buy into this rising tide of like Golgari sucks, Golgari is unplayable. Because yes, it seems easy to start there, and I certainly did. But then the more I kind of investigated, the more I talked to other people on my team who have been drafting a lot, the more I came to the conclusion that like Golgari's fine. It's not as flashy because its mechanic is not supported, and that makes you want to dismiss the whole guild. But I think that Golgari has actually enough good cards that you can just build a legitimate Golgari deck. It also combines pretty nicely with blue. So Sultai, right? Golgari plus Dimir is a fine place to be. So I've splashed a lot of Affectionate Indrix in my Dimir decks, and there's enough guild gates that if you end up with a couple guild gates of each color and maybe a district guide, you can just kind of play 3. You're playing 2 Notion Reigns in your Golgari control deck, and you're going to end up really happy with that result.
Man, I just don't see so basically what you're saying is that if I have a Golgari deck, I might get some random undergrowth stuff, but that shouldn't be my focus.
Right.
And instead I should just weigh the deck by the strength of the cards in it. Right.
Yeah,
and when you got hooked up, okay, that I agree with, right? Like I think Golgari Finebroker is very good. Right. And this is my point, is that like I don't think that the gold cards are very good. Like Erstwhile Trooper's not very good, right?
It's not great.
And Glowspore Shaman's okay. Molder Hulk's really not very good.
No, not like Molder Hulk very much.
Yeah, I like Okran Assassin a little bit, but
Assassin's good.
I don't think it's great, right? Undercity Uprising, Swarm Guildmage, okay. Rhizome Lurcher's been okay.
Yeah, I think
that's
Rhizome
kind of all
good.
the cool. I mean, Statue's good. You got that. But these are all
Statue's quite good. But part of it too is you're not just drafting gold cards; you're also drafting colors. So if these 2 colors are open, you're going to get 7th or 8th pick Generous Strays, and that card is good in this format. You're going to get 3rd pick or 4th pick Deadweights if black is open, and you're going to end up in a spot where you have enough card quality that you can put together a pretty good deck. Okay.
We shall see, my friend. We shall see. My gut says that none of these, like, that it's not. I actually have it, like, let's just put it this way. I have it in its own. Like, I have Celestia enough above it.
Here's my hot take.
It's its own thing. Okay.
In a month, we'll think Golgari is better than Celestia.
Okay, I'm in. I want that to happen. I love it when things change around from what we see earlier. All right. Well, that's good. I think that's a good place to end as well. Is your scalding hot Golgari take? How did that deck do, by the way? I had to go to sleep.
I misbuilt it and played bad and went 2-1.
Okay, so it was good. I mean, that deck was legit good, right? Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
your card quality was absurd.
3 Golgari Finebrokers and Izoni. Like, it wasn't a real deck.
Yeah, that was an absurd deck. Okay, well, let's call it a show here, Luis. First impressions are always really fun because we will know so much more in another 2 to 3 weeks or after the Pro Tour or whatever. But this is where we really have got a chance to start molding our takes on these on the new set. And I love this part where we don't really know yet, right? Where things could easily change around. And that's, of course, part of the fun. You can find us on social media if you want to give us your power rankings on, I guess, anything. I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to this podcast at lrcast.com, including links to all the stuff that we talked about, like the Patreon and Luis's stream and all that kind of stuff right on the front page of lrcast.com, as well as every episode of LR ever. All of them, from 1 to 461. They are all available for download or listening or streaming or whatever, however you want to get it. They're all there. For you to listen to going back through time. I want to thank our sponsor, channelfireball.com. And this is where I like to remind you about the magic circle of life. This is where you can get some money back for those cards that you got collecting dust. If you want to sell them to Channel Fireball and trade them in for store credit, they give you a 30% bonus. And I always try to make sure that people are aware of this because I'll often see players with like a binder full of cards that they're never going to use. And it's like, you could turn that into boxes. You could turn those into things for your Highlander deck or whatever it is that you're trying to do. And the 30% really makes that a lot easier to do.
You could sell us all your undergrowth cards and get some Skynet Legionnaires.
There you go. Turn those sideways. So I like that idea. So make sure you check that out on channelfireball.com next time you are there and get your value. That's going to do it for this one. We'll be back with more next week. We'll see you then.
So I had an interesting conversation with Huey today, actually, our former world champion. So here's the scenario. You have the option of giving one of your friends $1,000, but they don't know it came from you or that you had anything to do with it. or you get a smaller dollar amount. And we were discussing for just kind of as a thought exercise at what levels we thought different people would choose to give money to their friends over themselves. So let me give an example. You can either choose to anonymously gift, let's say, Owen $1,000, right? He's a friend of yours.
Yeah.
Or you can get $100.
Okay.
Actually, I'm going to put you on the spot. What's your number for Owen? I'm going to tell Owen too.
So my initial inclination is that if the numbers, lower by any significant amount, I'd much rather just have my friend get it. Like I tend to think in that way, like in a utilitarian kind of way. But like if you came up to me and said, you can have $900 or I'll give Owen $1,000, like that's a scenario that we're talking about here. I could just say, I'll just take the 900.
Yeah. And remember, you don't get credit for this. I guess you're getting credit in this individual scenario because I said I was going to say, okay, I've changed my mind. I will not tell him. You're not getting credit. Just fire it off.
I would say $750.
Wow, that is generous.
Seriously, like I believe in that stuff.
The world is clearly better off if more people do that kind of thing.
And I act that way. Like it just makes sense to me. Like I'll do things that are pretty not against or pretty well against my own well-being if I think it's like legit. I just think that's like there's a fairness level to that or something. I don't know how to put it.
Yeah, it is. Basically, the conclusion that we've come to is it's unfortunate if you think one of your friends would choose something like $10 for themselves or $1,000 for one of their friends.
Yeah, that's really crappy.
I think that it ends up just making – because yes, this is a magical scenario. A genie's coming out of a bottle and doing this. But you're faced with these kind of decisions in reality a lot of times, right? Like,
oh, yeah.
You can do something and it'll benefit you slightly, or it can benefit your friend a ton. Which do you choose? And I would hope that most people would choose to benefit their friend a ton because, again, that makes everyone much better off. But putting a dollar amount on it is always interesting. I would say, like, for me, most of the time, like, my breaking point is I would probably choose, at about half or so. Like, I think most of the time I would choose to take $500 versus one of my friends getting $1,000. But I wouldn't choose to take $200 over them getting $1,000. Scale matters too.
By the way, this circles back to your networking point really well.
It actually does. Except,
doesn't it?
Here's the sick part. Networking is choosing to give your friend $1,000 and you also get $200.
Yes.
It's just that
that's a
over
great
and
way
over
to put
again.
that.
It's
yes,
awesome.
that is.
Sometimes it's choosing to give your friend $1,000 and you get $1,200. It's just amazing. Yeah. But the scale matters too, by the way. If I asked you that same question, but it was $10 million versus 700 or 7.5 million, you're going to take the 7.5 million.
You are correct. I absolutely am. You are correct.
I was going to call you a liar if you didn't.
No, I will not argue with you on that one. I don't know why that doesn't, like, I guess because the numbers are so completely absurd.
It becomes life-changing. $750 is not life-changing to you.
Right. Right.
It is to some people, but it's not to you. So you can give that up a lot easier. So I think an interesting exercise for the listener is what is your number when you're talking about how much money you would get versus a close friend of yours who then did not know you or you were the benefactor.
Oh,
so,
I love it.
Something to think about.
So, by the way, I think your sign-off today may have just been net negative for the world because you're going to break up some friendships when they hear, what? $200? I thought we were friends.